The Apache woman was tied to the rancher's tree. She feared he'd harm her, but Among this vast, open land, a young Apache woman moved cautiously, her eyes alert to every sound. Her name was Nayeli, which meant "I am ready" in her language, and today she needed all her readiness more than ever. She had grown up in a small Apache village far to the north, where the traditions of her people guided every step of her life. From an early age, she had learned the importance of courage, respect, and understanding the ways of nature. But the world beyond her village was different, harsh, unforgiving, and full of dangers she could never fully predict. Nayeli's journey had not been easy. She had traveled for days with only a small bundle of possessions, seeking food and safety. Her path had led her near the edge of a ranch, a vast stretch of land that seemed endless, with wooden fences marking its boundaries and a large, sturdy house at its center. From a distance, she could see the rancher, a tall man with broad shoulders and a stern expression, moving around his property. The stories she had heard about him were not kind. Travelers spoke of his strictness, of the way he punished anyone who dared trespass on his land. Nayeli's heart quickened as she realized she had wandered too close, but it was too late to turn back without being noticed. As she crouched behind a cluster of rocks, her mind raced. She considered her options: run, hide, or hope he did not see her. Each possibility was fraught with danger. Running might provoke him. Hiding might not be enough if he was observant. Hoping could be foolish, but it was all she had left. The rancher's eyes swept the land methodically, sharp and calculating. Nayeli felt a chill run down her spine. She reminded herself that she was strong and smart, that she had survived difficult situations before, and that her people had taught her to remain calm even when fear threatened to overwhelm her. Suddenly, a dog barked in the distance, breaking the uneasy silence. Nayeli froze. The rancher's gaze sharpened and he began walking toward her hiding spot. Her pulse pounded in her ears and she felt the sweat on her brow. She tried to make herself as small and quiet as possible, her mind repeating one thought over and over: she must survive, she must survive. But within moments, she realized that escape was no longer an option. The rancher's approach was steady and deliberate. His shadow fell across her hiding place, and before she could react, a strong hand gripped her arm. She struggled, but his hold was firm. Fear surged through her like fire. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I mean no harm." The rancher's eyes studied her carefully. His face was hard to read, neither cruel nor entirely kind. He said nothing, only tightened his grip and began leading her toward a large oak tree near the edge of the ranch. Nayeli's heart sank as she realized what was happening. Stories of punishment, captivity, and harsh treatment filled her mind. She feared the worst. The rancher, sensing her panic, spoke for the first time, his voice low and calm. "Sit here," he said, motioning to the ground. "Do not move." Nayeli hesitated but obeyed. Her wrists were bound with rough rope, cutting slightly into her skin. She winced but stayed still, her mind spinning with questions. Why was she being treated this way? Was it a punishment, a warning, or something worse? She had never encountered a man like him before. Her thoughts drifted to her family, her village, and the safety she had taken for granted. She felt a pang of sorrow and longing for the familiar faces of her people. But there was no time to dwell on sadness. Survival demanded focus, and she needed to understand this strange situation quickly. As she sat under the tree, the rancher paced slowly around her. His steps were heavy but measured, as if he were thinking deeply about what to do next. Nayeli watched him carefully, noting every detail. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his eyes, but his movements betrayed patience rather than aggression. He stopped occasionally to inspect the rope around her wrists, then continued pacing. Nayeli's fear battled with curiosity. There was something unusual about the way he handled her, not the way she had imagined a cruel man would. He seemed cautious, almost careful, not wanting to harm her. Still, the rope reminded her that she was powerless for now, and fear refused to leave her heart. Time stretched on slowly. The sun shifted across the sky, and the shadows of the tree grew longer. Naomi's mind wandered, imagining countless scenarios, most of them terrifying. But occasionally, she noticed the rancher doing small, inexplicable things. He adjusted the shade of the rope, making it slightly more comfortable. He moved a branch that had fallen near her feet. Small gestures, almost unnoticed, but they hinted that perhaps he was not as cruel as she had feared. She could not understand why he had tied her up at all, but these little signs of care planted a seed of doubt in her mind. Maybe her assumptions were wrong. Maybe not everything about this man was dangerous. Despite the fear, Naomi's thoughts returned to survival strategies. She considered the rope, its knots, and the strength required to break free. She scanned the surrounding area for potential tools or distractions. Every instinct honed from years of living in the wild urged her to remain alert. Yet she also recognized that panic would be her enemy. She needed patience, observation, and careful calculation. Her people had taught her to read the environment, to understand human behavior, and to use her mind as her greatest weapon. In this moment, those lessons were her lifeline. The rancher eventually stopped pacing and leaned against the tree a few feet away from her. He watched her silently, his posture relaxed but deliberate. Naomi could feel his gaze, and it made her uneasy. But this time she noticed something different. There was no immediate threat in his eyes. There was thoughtfulness, perhaps even concern. She dared to breathe more steadily, though her heart still raced. For the first time since being captured, a flicker of hope appeared. Maybe she could survive this encounter without harm. Maybe there was a reason behind his actions that she did not yet understand. Hours passed, though it felt like days. The wind shifted, carrying the distant sounds of animals and the rustle of the grass. Naomi's body ached from sitting in one position, but her mind remained sharp. She observed the rancher carefully, noting how he interacted with the land, how he moved, and how he spoke to the animals on his property. There was a rhythm to his actions, a methodical nature that suggested experience and responsibility. She realized that perhaps he was not a reckless or cruel man, but someone who lived by his own rules, a man shaped by the harsh realities of the land. As the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, Naomi's fear slowly began to shift. It did not disappear entirely, but it was tempered by curiosity and cautious trust. She wondered why he had captured her, why he had tied her up, and what he truly intended. The uncertainty was still there, but it no longer felt like certain doom. Instead, it became a puzzle she needed to solve, a challenge that required both bravery and wisdom. Her instincts told her that survival might come not from escape alone, but from understanding the man who held her fate in his hands. Finally, as the sky turned a warm shade of orange and the first stars began to appear, the rancher spoke again. His voice was steady, measured, and surprisingly calm. "You are safe here," he said. "I mean you no harm. But you need to understand the rules of this land if you want to stay alive." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. Safe. Could she really believe those words after the fear she had felt all day? She studied his face, searching for any hint of deception, but found none. Perhaps, she thought, the world was more complicated than she had imagined. Not every encounter was as simple as fear or danger. Sometimes, survival required patience, observation, and an openness to unexpected truths. As night fell and the temperature cooled, Naomi remained tied to the tree, but her fear had shifted into cautious awareness. She watched the rancher as he prepared a small fire nearby, tending to it with care. The flames flickered and danced, casting warm light on the surrounding land. Naomi thought of her village, of the lessons she had learned, and of the resilience that had carried her this far. She realized that this moment, terrifying as it had been, was also a chance to learn, to understand, and perhaps even to survive in a world that was far larger and more complex than she had ever known. And so, under the vast sky and the watchful gaze of the rancher, Nayeli waited. She waited not only for the night to pass, but for the truth to reveal itself. She waited for the story of this encounter to unfold, knowing that fear was only the beginning, and courage, patience, and understanding would determine what came next. Nayeli sat under the oak tree, her wrists still bound, feeling the rope's rough fibers pressing into her skin. The fire the rancher had made cast long shadows, flickering across the dusty ground, and the wind whispered softly through the leaves above. She was not fully at ease. How could she be? Fear had been her constant companion since she first wandered onto this land, and though the rancher's words promised safety, her instincts told her to remain cautious. Yet, as the minutes passed, something in her chest began to change. A small, fragile curiosity was stirring, fighting against the fear that had held her so tightly. Her mind wandered to the stories her grandmother had once told her, tales of courage, wisdom, and survival in the harshest conditions. Her grandmother's voice seemed to echo in her memory, reminding her that fear was natural, but it did not have to control her. Nayeli closed her eyes briefly and took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She reminded herself that she had survived countless challenges in her life, and that this situation, as terrifying as it seemed, was no different. She needed patience, observation, and a clear mind. She opened her eyes and studied the rancher again. He was tending the fire carefully, moving slowly and deliberately. His broad hands handled the sticks with surprising gentleness, and his movements suggested someone used to working with animals and land rather than someone who sought to harm others. Nayeli could not yet trust him, but she realized that perhaps her assumptions about his intentions had been shaped by fear and stories she had heard rather than facts she had observed. The tension in her chest eased slightly, replaced by cautious awareness. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Nayeli's body ached from sitting in one position, but her mind remained sharp. She tried to recall the lessons she had learned from her village, thinking of how her people observed the world and read the intentions of others. Small details mattered: the way someone's eyes moved, the tone of their voice, the way they treated the land around them. Nayeli began to notice these things in the rancher. He spoke to the animals as he worked, calling them gently by name. He adjusted the fire so that it would not spread to dry grass. His eyes, when they met hers, were steady, not cruel or threatening. As the sun began to set fully, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple, Nayeli's fear remained but had transformed. It was no longer pure panic. It was a complicated mix of caution, curiosity, and an emerging sense of hope. She realized that she needed to observe more closely, to understand this man and his intentions. Perhaps there was a reason he had tied her here, and perhaps, if she could read it correctly, she might find a way to survive without harming herself or him. The rancher noticed her watching him. He straightened and walked toward her, his movements careful as though he did not want to startle her. Nayeli tensed, unsure whether to flinch or stay still. But he did not speak harshly or make sudden gestures. Instead, he knelt a few feet away, resting his elbows on his knees. His eyes met hers, calm and measured. "You're frightened," he said simply. Nayeli wanted to deny it, to say she was strong and unafraid, but the truth burned hot in her chest. She nodded slightly, unable to find words at first. Fear had a way of silencing people, especially when their lives seemed to hang in the balance. "I would be too," the rancher continued. "I understand why you think I might harm you, but I am not your enemy, not tonight." Nayeli's eyes narrowed, trying to read him, to see if this was some trick, some lie meant to catch her off guard. She remembered every warning she had ever heard. Strangers could be dangerous, especially men who owned land and animals. And yet something in the way he spoke, the way he held himself, suggested sincerity. She dared to take a slightly deeper breath, though her heart still pounded. Why did you tie me up?" she asked finally, her voice trembling. The rancher paused, considering his words. "Because I did not know who you were or why you were here. I needed to protect both you and my land. It was the only way I could be sure neither of us was harmed." Naeli studied his face, looking for signs of deception, but found none. Slowly, she realized that perhaps he had acted out of caution rather than malice. Fear, she understood, could make people do strange things. And yet, she still had questions. How could someone who seemed so strong and capable also act with such care? How could he be both a man of authority and yet gentle enough to adjust the rope and tend the fire without scaring her further? As night deepened, the sounds of the ranch settled around them. Crickets chirped in the grass, the occasional hoot of an owl echoed from the nearby woods, and the fire crackled softly. Naeli's stomach growled faintly, reminding her that she had not eaten since morning. She looked at the rancher, wondering if he would share food or if that was too bold a thought. "Are you hungry?" he asked, as if reading her mind. Naeli hesitated. She had learned in her travels that accepting help from strangers could be dangerous. But his tone was neither mocking nor threatening. It was simply matter of fact. Slowly, she nodded. He reached into a bag nearby and pulled out some dried meat and bread, offering it to her. Naeli took it cautiously, examining every piece, sniffing it before taking a small bite. It was safe. The taste of food warmed her body and eased some of the tension in her chest. As she ate, she realized something important. Fear could make her see the world as far more dangerous than it was, and yet it was also a protective instinct, keeping her alert. The key, she thought, was balance, acknowledging fear without letting it control her. After she had eaten, the rancher settled back near the fire. Naeli watched him closely, noticing the careful way he shifted logs, adjusted the flames, and observed the surroundings. He seemed aware of everything around him, the land, the animals, the night sky. It was clear he had lived here for many years, learning to survive in a world that could be unforgiving. Naeli felt a strange mix of respect and caution. This man who she had feared moments before was not simply a threat. He was a part of the land, shaped by it, and perhaps in some way he was like her, trying to survive. As the hours passed, Naeli's thoughts drifted to her village and her family. She remembered her mother's hands, strong and gentle, teaching her how to make baskets and cook over an open fire. She remembered her father's voice, telling stories of the stars, of ancestors who had survived great hardships. And she remembered her own lessons, how to move quietly, how to watch, how to trust instincts while also thinking carefully. All of these lessons now guided her as she sat bound under the oak tree, watching the man who had captured her. Slowly, she realized that she had begun to understand something important about fear. Fear was not always the enemy. It was a warning, a guide, a signal that she needed to pay attention, but it did not have to dictate her actions completely. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting in spite of it. Naeli had been afraid since she arrived on the ranch, but now she began to feel the first stirrings of courage. She could face this night, this man, and whatever came next if she kept her mind sharp and her instincts ready. The rancher spoke again, breaking her thoughts. "Tomorrow," he said, "we will need to decide what happens next. For now, rest. The night is quiet and you are safe here." Naeli nodded slowly. She was still cautious, still unsure of his full intentions, but she felt a flicker of trust beginning to grow. She realized that survival depended not only on strength and speed, but also on understanding, patience, and observation. She had been tied to the tree, yes, but in that moment she felt that her mind and spirit were free, thinking, learning, and adapting to a situation she could not control. As the fire burned low and the night deepened, Naeli allowed herself a small measure of calm. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the sound of the wind and the fire soothe her. She knew that danger could return at any moment, but she also knew that she had faced challenges before and survived. The night was long, but so was her resolve. And in the quiet darkness under the vast sky filled with stars, Naomi understood something vital. Fear might guide her, but courage, patience, and understanding would determine her survival. And so she waited, alert yet cautious, prepared for whatever the next day might bring. The rancher remained nearby, a steady presence, neither friend nor enemy fully revealed. The tension remained, but it had changed. It was no longer pure terror. It had become a complex dance of fear, observation, and the first signs of cautious hope. Naomi had survived this long, and she knew that the coming hours would test her strength, her wits, and her heart. But she also knew that she was ready. The first light of dawn crept slowly across the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. Naomi stirred under the oak tree, her wrists still bound but her mind sharper than ever. The night had been long, filled with thoughts, fears, and questions that had kept her awake. She had watched the rancher carefully, noting every movement, every gesture, every word. And now, as the morning wind brushed against her face, she realized something important. The man who had tied her up was not what she had feared, but she was not yet certain what he truly intended. She took a deep breath and tried to shake off the stiffness in her limbs. The rope cut into her wrist slightly, but she had learned to endure discomfort when it came to survival. Her eyes scanned the surroundings, the wide-open plains, the distant hills, and the ranch buildings that seemed both imposing and oddly welcoming. She could hear the faint sounds of animals stirring, the lowing of cows, the clatter of chickens, the rustle of a small fox moving through the grass. Life was moving on the ranch as it always had, indifferent to her presence, yet she was part of it now in an unusual, tense way. The rancher emerged from the shadows of the house, carrying a small bucket of water. He walked toward her slowly, his steps deliberate, his expression unreadable. Naomi stiffened, unsure if she should speak or remain silent. The lessons of her life had taught her that every word, every gesture could be critical. She decided to wait, to watch, to listen. He knelt a short distance from her and set the bucket down. "Drink," he said calmly. "You will need strength today." Naomi looked at him carefully, assessing his tone, his eyes, his posture. There was no malice there, no hint of cruelty. It was simple, practical, and almost kind. Hesitantly, she took the bucket and drank. The cool water refreshed her, easing some of the tension in her chest and throat. She realized slowly that the fear she had carried for so long was beginning to shift, not entirely gone, but tempered by a cautious curiosity. Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly, unable to contain the question any longer. The rancher paused and looked at her. His eyes, steady and calm, met hers directly. "Because I need to understand you and you need to understand me," he said. "I cannot let you wander freely until I know there is no danger to either of us. That is the way of survival on this land." Naomi considered his words. They were strange, almost confusing, but they carried a logic she could understand. Survival often required caution, preparation, and understanding. And though she had feared for her life last night, she began to see that perhaps the man was not cruel but careful. His care, however unusual, was a sign of thoughtfulness rather than cruelty. Hours passed as the morning sun rose higher, and Naomi's mind continued to turn over every detail. She watched as the rancher tended to the animals, moving with patience and authority. He fed the chickens, checked on the cows, and even spoke softly to a horse tied near the stable. Naomi noticed that he had a way of observing everything around him, reading the land and the animals as if he had been doing it for a lifetime. She admired his skill silently, recognizing that he had survived by learning and adapting, just as she had in her own way. Finally, he approached her again. This time he carried a small knife and a length of rope. Naomi's heart skipped a beat, panic rising sharply. Was he planning to hurt her now? But instead of striking or threatening, he knelt and carefully untied the rope around her wrists. His movements were deliberate, careful not to cause pain. "You are free," he said simply, "but do not move too quickly. I need you to understand what comes next." Nayeli rubbed her wrists where the rope had cut into her skin. The relief was immediate, but her caution remained. She had survived danger before, and she knew that freedom often brought new challenges. She looked at him, searching for any hint of deception, but found none. Slowly, she realized that perhaps her fear had been shaped more by assumptions than by reality. As she stood, testing her muscles, the rancher spoke again. "There is work to be done today. You will help me, and in return you will learn. We must understand each other if we are to survive this day." Nayeli hesitated. Work, learning, she had not expected anything like this. Yet something in his tone suggested that he genuinely wanted to teach her, to help her navigate the land rather than harm her. Slowly, she nodded. She was wary, but curiosity and the need to survive outweighed her fear. They began with simple tasks. Nayeli followed him to the barn, where he showed her how to feed the animals properly. His instructions were clear and patient, and she noticed that he corrected mistakes gently rather than harshly. Nayeli found herself learning quickly, using her previous experiences of observation and patience. The work was hard, and her muscles ached from long hours of standing and lifting, but there was a rhythm to it that felt satisfying. She began to see that survival required skill, understanding, and cooperation, not just strength or fear. As the morning progressed, Nayeli began to notice small gestures from the rancher that deepened her understanding. When she struggled with a task, he offered guidance rather than criticism. When an animal seemed distressed, he showed her how to calm it gently. And always, he watched her closely, ensuring her safety even while testing her ability to learn. Nayeli's fear began to transform into a complicated mixture of respect, curiosity, and cautious trust. She still remained alert. Her instincts had been honed over years of survival, but she began to see the man in a new light. Around midday, the rancher stopped the work and offered her some food. They sat under the shade of a tree, eating quietly. Nayeli's mind wandered as she chewed, thinking about the events of the previous day and the strange transformation in her perception of this man. She had come expecting cruelty, danger, and perhaps violence. Instead, she had found patience, instruction, and careful observation. Her fear had been justified in part, but her assumptions about the rancher's intentions had been wrong. After the meal, the rancher stood and gestured toward the distant hills. "There is more to see," he said. "We must walk and understand the land together." Nayeli rose cautiously. Walking alongside him, she felt the tension in her chest ease slightly. The land stretched out before them, rolling hills, patches of trees, and the grazing animals scattered across the plains. The rancher spoke about the patterns of the land, the behavior of the animals, and the importance of paying attention to small details. Nayeli listened carefully, absorbing every word. She realized that he was teaching her not just about survival, but about trust, observation, and the way people could coexist with the world around them. As they walked, a small incident tested both of them. A young calf had wandered too close to a steep slope and teetered dangerously. Nayeli's instincts kicked in, and she moved quickly to help, but it was the rancher who guided her hands and actions, showing her the safest way to secure the animal. In that moment, she saw the depth of his skill and care. He was not a man to fear recklessly. He was someone who understood responsibility, danger, and the fragility of life. By late afternoon, they returned to the ranch. Nayeli was tired, her body aching from the day's work, but her mind felt sharper and more alert than ever. She had learned that fear could guide her, but understanding could empower her. She had seen that courage was not the absence of fear, but acting with knowledge and care. And most importantly, she had begun to see the rancher not as a threat, but as a complex human being, shaped by his life and his land. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across the ranch, Nayeli and the rancher sat quietly by the fire. She thought about the day, about the lessons learned, and about the slow transformation of her fear into understanding. The tension remained, but it had changed. It was no longer a paralyzing panic, but a cautious awareness, a readiness to face whatever came next. The rancher spoke finally, breaking the silence. "Tomorrow will bring more challenges," he said, "but you are learning. That is what matters. Understanding is the first step toward safety, and courage is the second." Nayeli nodded, feeling the truth of his words in her bones. The day had been long, filled with work, observation, and moments of fear, but it had also been filled with learning and growth. She realized that survival was not just about fleeing danger, but about understanding it, confronting it, and moving forward with awareness. As the night fell once more and the stars appeared in the sky, Nayeli felt a sense of cautious hope. She had faced fear, learned lessons, and begun to see the world and the rancher through a more nuanced lens. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new challenges, and perhaps new fears, but she knew now that she was ready. She had survived the first true encounter with the unknown, and she was stronger for it. And so, under the vast sky and the watchful eye of the rancher, Nayeli prepared for the next day, knowing that understanding, patience, and courage would guide her through whatever came next. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow across the vast plains. Nayeli stood near the barn, her body tired but alert. The previous days had been a mix of fear, learning, and cautious understanding. She had begun to see the rancher not as a threat, but as a man shaped by his land, his work, and the challenges he had faced in life. Yet she knew that survival on this land was never easy, and danger could appear when least expected. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of grass, earth, and animals. Nayeli followed the rancher as he led her to the fields, explaining the tasks for the day. They would be checking the fences, tending to the animals, and ensuring that no harm came to the livestock. The work was hard, demanding both strength and careful attention, but Nayeli had grown stronger over the past few days. Her muscles ached, but her mind remained sharp. She observed everything: the movements of the rancher, the behavior of the animals, and the subtle changes in the wind that could signal danger. As they worked, the rancher spoke softly, teaching her how to repair a fence, how to guide the cattle, and how to anticipate the needs of the animals. Nayeli listened carefully, absorbing each lesson. She realized that understanding the land and its creatures was as important as understanding people. The rancher's instructions were clear and patient, and she felt herself growing more capable with each task. There was a rhythm to the work, a pattern that mirrored the lessons she had learned from her people in her village. Patience, observation, and careful action were key to survival. Suddenly, a loud cry echoed across the fields. Nayeli froze, her heart racing. The rancher's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the distance. Then she saw it. A young horse had broken free from the stable and was running toward the edge of a steep ravine. Panic surged through her chest. She wanted to run and help, but she knew she needed to act carefully. The rancher moved quickly, his long strides carrying him toward the horse. "Stay back," he shouted, though there was no anger in his voice, only urgency. "Watch me and follow exactly as I say." Nayeli nodded, fear and determination fighting for control in her chest. She watched as the rancher positioned himself between the horse and the edge of the ravine, speaking softly to the animal, his voice calm and steady. Nayeli realized that panic would not help. Only clear thinking and careful action would save the horse. She mimicked the rancher's movements, positioning herself slightly behind the horse, ready to assist if needed. The young horse skidded near the edge, its hooves scraping against the rocks. Nayeli's heart pounded. One wrong move could send it tumbling down. She remembered the lessons of her village: patience, observation, and steady hands. Slowly she stepped closer, speaking softly, trying to calm the animal. The rancher's eyes met hers briefly, nodding as if to say, "You are doing well." Keep going. With careful coordination, they guided the horse away from the ravine. Naomi's hands shook, but she kept her focus, mirroring the rancher's movements and responding to the horse's shifts. Finally, the young animal slowed, its breathing heavy but its steps steady. They had succeeded. Naomi felt a rush of relief and pride. The rancher placed a hand gently on her shoulder, acknowledging her courage and skill. "You did well," he said quietly. "Today you saw that courage is not just about facing fear, it is about controlling it and acting wisely." Naomi nodded, still catching her breath. She realized the truth in his words. Fear had guided her attention, but it was her calm, careful actions that had saved the horse. She understood now that true courage was a balance between alertness and thoughtful action. She had feared the unknown, but through observation, patience, and trust, she had faced it and succeeded. The rest of the day passed in a blur of tasks, but the earlier incident had changed something between them. Naomi no longer saw the rancher merely as a captor. She saw him as a teacher, a guide, and someone who understood the balance between caution and action. They worked together seamlessly, repairing fences, feeding animals, and moving through the fields with a quiet sense of purpose. The partnership was unspoken but powerful, a combination of skill, observation, and mutual respect. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, a new challenge appeared. A sudden storm rolled in from the distant hills, dark clouds gathering quickly and winds picking up speed. The animals became restless, sensing the approaching danger. Naomi's heart quickened. She had never faced a storm of this magnitude alone. She glanced at the rancher, who was already moving with precision, directing the animals to safety and securing the loose equipment around the ranch. "Help me with the gates," he shouted over the growing wind. Naomi ran to his side, her mind focused on the tasks at hand. Together, they worked quickly, closing gates, guiding animals, and securing tools and supplies. The storm hit with sudden force, rain lashing against their faces and the wind threatening to knock them off balance. Naomi's fear surged, but she pushed it aside, relying on the lessons of the past days. She observed the rancher's movements, following his lead, and used her own skills to anticipate the animal's behavior. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the darkened fields. Thunder rolled, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Naomi felt the power of nature, raw and uncontrollable, but she also felt a strange sense of connection. This was the land she had feared, the rancher she had doubted, and the animals she had learned to care for, all part of a world that demanded respect and understanding. She realized that survival was not about avoiding danger but facing it with courage, skill, and cooperation. Hours passed as the storm raged, and finally the worst of it began to subside. The rain lessened, the wind calmed, and the animals, though wet and restless, were safe. Naomi sank to the ground, exhausted but exhilarated. She looked at the rancher, who was also soaked and tired, yet had a steady, calm expression. For the first time she felt a deep sense of trust, not blind trust, but a recognition of his skill, patience, and care. "You have learned well today," he said quietly. "Not just about the land or the animals, but about yourself. You faced fear, acted wisely, and survived. That is what matters." Naomi nodded, her chest still heavy with adrenaline. She realized that the storm had been a test, not only of their skills, but of their ability to trust and work together. She had feared the unknown, feared the man who had tied her to the tree, feared the land itself. But now she understood that courage was born from facing those fears and acting with awareness and purpose. As night fell and the sky cleared, stars appearing once more in the darkened sky, Naomi sat quietly by the fire with the rancher. The animals were calm, the storm had passed, and a sense of peace settled over the ranch. Naomi reflected on the day, on the lessons learned, and on the subtle shifts in her understanding of the rancher. He had acted with patience, care, and wisdom, revealing a side of humanity she had not expected. Fear had guided her attention, but understanding and courage had allowed her to survive and grow. She realized that her journey was far from over. Challenges would come again, new fears would arise, and the unknown would continue to test her. But she now had a new perspective, a balance of caution, observation, and trust. She had seen that people could be complex, that actions could have deeper meaning, and that fear was only one part of survival. With patience and courage, she could navigate the world, even in situations that seemed impossible. And so, under the wide-open sky and the watchful gaze of the rancher, Nayeli rested. Her body ached, her mind was alert, and her spirit had grown stronger. She had faced fear, survived the storm, and begun to understand the world in a way she never had before. The journey was not over, but she was ready. With courage, awareness, and trust, she would face whatever challenges awaited her next. The bond between Nayeli and the rancher had begun to shift, no longer captor and captive, but teacher and learner, partners in survival, and two human beings navigating the unpredictable land together. The storm had tested them, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more aware. Nayeli understood now that fear could guide her, but courage, understanding, and cooperation would determine her true path. The morning after the storm, the ranch lay quiet and calm. The air smelled fresh from the rain, carrying the earthy scent of wet soil and grass. Nayeli stretched her arms, feeling the ache in her muscles from the past day's work, but also a quiet sense of pride. She had faced fear, survived challenges, and learned lessons that went beyond survival. They were lessons about trust, courage, and understanding. The rancher moved quietly around the property, checking fences, feeding the animals, and surveying the land. Nayeli followed him, her movements confident and measured. She no longer felt the constant, sharp edge of fear that had gripped her when she first arrived. Instead, she felt a new kind of awareness, a mix of caution, respect, and growing trust. She understood now that fear could guide her, but it did not have to control her. Courage came from acting wisely despite fear. The rancher glanced at her as she worked and nodded approvingly. "You have learned much," he said, "not just about the land, but about yourself." "That is the most important lesson." Nayeli smiled faintly. Words were not always necessary. The shared work, the quiet moments, and the challenges they had faced together spoke louder than anything. She realized that trust had been built slowly, through observation, patience, and shared effort. It was not something given lightly, and it was not something that could be forced. It had grown naturally, through their actions and choices. As the day progressed, Nayeli and the rancher faced smaller challenges. A cow had wandered into the wrong pasture, some tools had to be repaired, and the animals needed constant attention. But these tasks, while demanding, no longer felt overwhelming. Nayeli moved with purpose, anticipating needs, adjusting to situations, and learning the rhythms of the land. She noticed how the rancher observed her, offering guidance when necessary but allowing her to make decisions. She realized that true trust involved both freedom and support, a balance she had never experienced before. Around midday, they paused near the oak tree where Nayeli had first been tied. The memory of that moment still lingered, a mixture of fear, confusion, and uncertainty. But now she saw it differently. That tree, which had once represented danger and captivity, now symbolized a turning point, a place where fear had been confronted, lessons had been learned, and growth had begun. Nayeli looked at the rancher, realizing that the man who had seemed so intimidating was now someone she could respect and understand. "Do you remember this place?" the rancher asked, his voice calm. Nayeli nodded. "I remember everything," she said softly. "I remember fear and how I learned to face it." The rancher smiled faintly. "That is good," he said. "Fear is natural, but it is how we respond to it that shapes us." They sat together in silence for a moment, listening to the soft rustle of the wind through the leaves. Nayeli thought about the past days, the fear, the lessons, the challenges, and the moments of understanding. She realized that her journey had taught her more than she had expected. She had learned to trust carefully, to act wisely, and to find courage even in the most uncertain situations. As the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, the rancher led her to a small clearing near a stream. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and the sound of it flowing over rocks was soothing. Nayeli knelt by the stream, washing her hands and face, feeling the cool water ease the tension in her muscles. She looked up at the rancher who stood nearby, watching the animals drink. There was a quiet understanding between them now, unspoken but deeply felt. "You have grown strong in more ways than one," the rancher said. "Not just in body but in mind and spirit. You have faced challenges, learned quickly, and acted with courage. That is something few people can do." Nayeli felt a warmth in her chest. The words were not praise alone. They were acknowledgement of her growth, her resilience, and her ability to navigate a world that had seemed dangerous and unpredictable. She realized that she had changed, that the experiences of the past days had shaped her into someone stronger, wiser, and more aware. As the day turned into evening, the rancher prepared a small fire near the clearing. They sat together, sharing a simple meal, and Nayeli noticed how different the atmosphere felt from the first night she had spent tied to the tree. There was no fear now, only respect, understanding, and a quiet sense of accomplishment. The land, the animals, and the rancher had all taught her lessons that she would carry with her for the rest of her life. After the meal, Nayeli and the rancher walked along the edge of the property, observing the animals and checking the fences one last time for the day. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows and painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. Nayeli felt a sense of peace she had not known since leaving her village. The world was vast, unpredictable, and sometimes dangerous, but it was also full of opportunities for learning, growth, and understanding. "You have done well," the rancher said quietly as they reached the edge of the property. "Remember, courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting wisely despite it. You have learned that well," Nayeli nodded. "I understand," she said, "and I will remember it." As night fell, the stars appeared in the sky, shining brightly against the dark velvet of the night. Nayeli looked up, thinking of her family, her village, and the lessons she had learned along the way. She realized that life was a series of challenges and opportunities, and that fear, while natural, could be transformed into wisdom and courage. She had faced fear, survived the unknown, and learned to trust herself, and in a measured way others. The rancher sat beside her, tending the fire and observing the land. Nayeli felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for his guidance, but for the lessons she had learned about courage, observation, and patience. She understood now that true strength came not from brute force alone, but from understanding the world, making careful choices, and acting with both courage and wisdom. As the night deepened, Nayeli felt a sense of closure. The events that had begun with fear and uncertainty had transformed into lessons of growth, trust, and understanding. The rancher, once a figure of dread, had become a teacher, a guide, and someone who had shown her the importance of patience and careful observation. She realized that every challenge she had faced had contributed to her growth, shaping her into someone stronger and wiser. Before resting, Nayeli reflected on her journey. She had faced fear, survived challenges, learned new skills, and grown in ways she had never imagined. She had learned to observe carefully, act wisely, and trust cautiously. She had discovered that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act thoughtfully despite it. And she had learned that even in unexpected circumstances, humans could show kindness, patience, and guidance. Finally, she closed her eyes, letting the cool night air and the soft glow of the fire soothe her. She knew that the journey was far from over. Life would continue to test her in new ways, but she also knew that she was ready. Armed with the lessons of the past days, she could face the unknown with courage, awareness, and careful trust. And so, under the vast sky beside the steady presence of the rancher, Nayeli rested. Her body was tired, her mind alert, and her spirit strong. She had survived fear, embraced courage, and learned the value of understanding and patience. The land around her was quiet now, the animals settled, and the night peaceful. Nayeli knew that whatever challenges awaited her next, she would face them with strength, wisdom, and the courage to act wisely. The story that had begun with fear and uncertainty had reached a place of growth, understanding, and hope. Nayeli had discovered that true courage was not reckless bravery, but careful, thoughtful action in the face of fear. She had learned that trust was earned through patience and observation, and that understanding the world and those around her could transform even the most frightening situations. And as the stars twinkled above, Nayeli knew that she had changed forever. She had survived the storm, both the literal one and the storm of fear, uncertainty, and danger, and emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever life had in store. The land, the rancher, and the lessons she had learned would stay with her forever, guiding her through the challenges and adventures that lay ahead.